Are you interested in becoming a professional artist? Well, firstly, you need to understand what that means. Like, what are the different paths to becoming an artist and how do they kind of differ? So when I was at school, I had teachers that encouraged me to draw, that kind of said that I should go into an art-based job, but I don't think they really knew what that meant. I think for them, art was just try and become a fine artist, you know, like a sculptor or a painter, and sell your pictures to the public. And if that doesn't work, maybe become an art teacher. Obviously, they knew there was art in comics, games, animation, films, packaging, graphic design, all that kind of stuff. But I don't think they really knew how to get into those types of jobs. So it was very much for them just teaching a few different art techniques or looking at different sort of classical fine artists. And, you know, there's merit in that, but most people studying art, or most people that go to school generally, will end up coming out of school and then needing to find a job, needing to find money and work. And how do you do that? And I didn't really understand at the time the different career paths that there were. So I'm just going to highlight 6 that I feel are valid, and you can tell me which one you might fit. The first one is being a concept artist for films and games and TV shows, things like that. So basically, half the people that work those jobs are going to go to an office type environment. They're going to have basically like a 9 to 5, you know, typical sort of scheduled work. They don't have to worry about getting work in. It's like you just go to your job, do your job. The other half of people are going to be working for those same companies, game companies, for example, and they're going to be contracted to work on a single project or for a single set amount of time. And then they're going to need to renew a contract or move on to another company who's going to need them for their services there. So the sort of things that you're going to need to do if you're a concept artist is to create like characters, environments and assets. So like tools, objects, things like that. And the idea is to design them, to create something inventive, but something that can then communicate to someone who's going to then turn it into a 3D asset or a model and then animate it, just how exactly this thing works. You kind of almost want to be like a costume designer or a product designer as much as a sort of creative artist. It's less so about, you know, thinking about some cool dynamic pose to put the characters in and really thinking about the composition of the piece, and more about just communicating, for example, how the collar looks at different angles on the shirt, or an environment where it's like, okay, well, how does that look at this angle, good angle, so that I can take in as much information about this location as I can. So it's a lot about communicating with another team who are then going to implement your designs into the product that you're working on together. The next job you could try and get is to be an illustrator. So an illustrator's going to basically create single one-shot illustrations. Could be a small series of illustrations for services or adverts typically. And the idea with most illustrators is to basically find a simplistic and effective way of summing up a product or a brand or a piece. You know, if it's like a written piece in like a newspaper article type thing, like how can you sum that up with one thing? How can you convey the benefits of the product being advertised? If you're drawing a chocolate bar, for example, for a chocolate bar brand, how can you convey that this is a tasty chocolate bar that people are going to enjoy? And how are they going to enjoy it? Are they going to enjoy it with friends, family, stuff like that? And therefore, you're going to need to figure out an effective way to communicate that. And it's about communicating the idea, I think, more so than the aesthetics per se. Like if you're someone that likes lots of hyper detailed artwork that just, you know, spends, you know, months creating this amazing detailed piece that you just want to spend forever looking at, you're probably not going to be as good a fit for an illustrator. It's not typical, but I do notice the illustrators that seem to be really successful, ones that almost can just show something in almost like a children's book simplified kind of way and communicate it quickly and effectively and in as quick a time as possible. So maybe that sounds more like your thing, maybe not. The other thing you could do is maybe become a comic artist, a manga artist. So if you like telling stories and you want to create like a sequential narrative, then that's a potential road to go down. You can't just be good at drawing characters. You also need to be able to draw environments. Then you need to draw those characters situated in those environments. You need to understand how to convey characters' emotions, objects reacting with each other. It's pretty involved, but I guess it's the thing that in an ideal world, a lot of artists would tend to gravitate towards, because we all love stories and we all like to, or we all want to be able to communicate those kind of things. These days, you're not so much going to be working in a studio, I think. You're not going to knock on the door of Marvel or DC HQ and say, I would like a job to sit down with, a dozen other artists at drawing boards in an office and sit down and, pencil comics all day. Instead, you tend to be working on your own, in your own environment, kind of on a contract freelance basis, and then either submitting that to a studio, or if you're working in a sort of self-published way, then you're going to need to basically promote and market your own artwork. And promoting and marketing is always the bane of any artist's life, because if you want to be an artist, you want to be that and not be a salesperson. Or maybe you do get people that want to be salespeople and artists at the same time, but normally you choose one over the other. The other thing you could do is maybe be a tattoo artist. So it used to be the case where it was very much its own kind of subculture vibe, where if you weren't part of that scene, you wouldn't ever really think to become a tattoo artist. I think these days, because of tutorials on the internet and just tattoos being more generally accepted in public, most people, anyone, even someone as neurotic as me, could become a tattoo artist. So it's something to consider if you just want to draw the sort of fun, cool little pictures that you like drawing as a kid mostly. If you like drawing like horror, for example, then you can get to do that as a tattoo artist. There's going to be people that like that kind of thing. At the end of the day, most tattoo artists are going to have to just work on whatever comes through the shop. So if religious looking artwork is popular this year, then you're going to be doing lots of religious stuff. If typography and text is popular, get ready to do lots of text. If it's more pattern work, get ready to do lots of patterns, etc., etc. So tattoo artist, possible career path. Fine artist is the other one, like I mentioned. Fine arts tends to be like drawing, painting, sculpture that gets shown in like art galleries or art shows. And this, I think, is what most people think of when you become an artist. This is what most just mainstream people think when they think of art. They think of, hanging, a beautiful painting on their living room walls. That's what they look for an artist to do. So a fine artist is going to sell their artwork, original canvases, for example, maybe prints, reproductions, or commission projects. So someone might want their pets or family created as a painting, and then as a fine artist, you'll go away and create that artwork. The other last thing is kind of the sort of thing that I'm trying to do. I don't really have a name for it. It's kind of like freelance artist. I don't know what else to call it, where you're basically doing a little bit of all of the above. So I'm creating the sort of artwork I want to draw. So like, let's say anime, manga characters. Now I know I can't typically sell that in a mainstream art gallery. People aren't going to want that. But I can sell it to people interested in that sort of thing at comic conventions, for example, or just online. There's a lot of people that would be happy to have that kind of artwork displayed on their walls, because to them it means something. And maybe a sunset or a field of flowers or something that's traditionally considered quite popular that you'd find in I don't know, like a local, even like a supermarket, if they were selling art, that kind of thing. It appeals to most people, but if you're not most people, and I think a lot of people like to think of themselves as an individual and would prefer something a bit more personalised if given the choice, then yeah, maybe there's a chance for me and other people to draw whatever we want, whether it is manga characters or horror or weird, abstract, alien-looking artwork. If that's what you want to do, then you could just become a freelance artist that's selling your own artwork. So a freelance artist, you're going to need to understand how to create a business. And this is true of fine artists, even tattoo artists, comic artists, illustrators, etc. You're going to need to understand how your business is going to work. Like, what service or product are you going to advertise, and how are you gonna advertise that? Do people want it? If they don't want it, how are you gonna convince them to want it? So have I missed anything? And if not, what sort of paths out of the ones I've discussed do you think would be a good fit for you? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you again in the next video.